All right, here is part 2 on your video lecture about producing. So we just talked about rhythm and flow, and we talked about, making sure that you break up packages and VOs and readers and strategically place them in the proper location. Now we're going to talk a little bit about ad-libs, bumps, teases, and tosses. So there was a phenomenon called happy talk that was really popular in the 80s. Happy talk was basically banter between anchors, when the anchors would talk with each other and joke with one another and really let their personalities show. In the 80s, the newscast kind of became overrun by this happy talk because stations were really pushing, we want the anchors to be like friends and family members. We want the audience to love them and know them and become close to them. But even the audience got a little bit tired of all the happy talk. So now we put a lot of happy talk in the C block, again with sports, because sports is generally more laid back and it's exciting, and it can be a time when you have more upbeat talk. You don't want to be telling jokes with each other and then say, now we're going to go to that fatal house fire. So a lot of times you'll still see some banter in the C block and maybe a little bit in the D block in the end of the newscast. But it's not nearly as frequent as it used to be. Also, happy talk, banter, you'll see that more in the morning shows too, because morning shows are a little bit more laid back in general, and also they're a lot longer. If you ever watch like the Today Show, there's like 3 hours of that thing, and local news isn't that long, but the local news sometimes have, a 2-hour morning show. So there's more happy talk in morning shows. But all that banter is generally ad-libbed. It's not scripted usually, and it's often done when a newscast is short. So you will have an earpiece if you're an anchor, and the producer will be saying to you, we got to fill a minute, guys. We need you to talk back and forth for a minute. And so a lot of times, if you have to ad-lib, call on the weather person. So the weatherman or the weather woman, generally when they give their weather forecast, they don't have a script that they read off of. So they are very good at ad-libbing and speaking off the cuff and being prepared to jump in and ad-lib. So you might say, hey, John, we got a 5K coming up this weekend. What's the weather going to be like? Or, hey, Sharon, do we need a jacket, when we go out to our cars this morning? So a lot of times you'll see the anchors talking to the weathercasters or maybe the sportscaster and trying to fill time. And you'll see this again a lot of times at the end of the newscast, as the producers being like, okay, we've got 30 more seconds to go. Talk for 30 seconds. A bump is basically a bump happens right before a commercial break. A bump is generic. A bump just says, we'll be back with more, stay with us. A tease is kind of like a bump, but it's more specific. It promotes a specific story or weather. So a bump is just, we'll be back with more, stay with us. A tease is, we'll have that story on the Cardinals' newest relief pitcher, stay tuned. So a bump is generic and a tease is specific. A toss is when you transition to another anchor. So oftentimes it's tossing to sports. So, you'll come back and you're getting ready to go into the C block, and the anchor will be like, welcome back to ABC 17 News, and now to sports, Dan. And then the camera will go to Dan, and Dan, the sports anchor, will take over and start talking about sports. And Dan will often toss it back to the news anchors, or Dan may toss it to the weather person. The anchor may toss to weather. So a toss is basically when one anchor throws the newscast to another anchor. Sports and weather are often the ones who see their time expand and contract. So if news is running long or news is running short, often producers rely on their sports team or their weather team to be able to fill time or to trim time. Because again, those people often are used to speaking without a script and ad-libbing and being able to bloviate and, talk about the Cardinals for longer than they had planned if they need to fill time. There's some technical aspects of producing you need to be familiar with. We're going to go through each of these individually, but they're downstream keys, also known as DSKs, and graphics. We're going to talk about the use of still pictures, the use of anchors, live shots, and also timing. So DSKs and graphics. A DSK, a downstream key, often it's called a key for short. It's a graphic that's 2 lines long and appears at the bottom of the screen. Often it's an identifier. So when Teresa Snow is on the air, it'll say down at the bottom of the screen, Teresa Snow on one line, second line, ABC News. And then Teresa Snow tosses the newscast to a reporter on the field. Let's say it's Amani Grant Pate. And she'll say, okay, now we're going to go to Amani Grant Pate, who has this story. And at the bottom of the screen, one line will say Amani Grant Pate, and the second line will say ABC 17 News. And then Amani's doing a package, and he happens to interview the police chief. And let's say the police chief's name is Susan Mills. So it'll say at the bottom of the screen, one line, Susan Mills, second line, police chief. So it's basically a key. It's 2 lines of text that appear at the bottom of the screen. A box graphic. You can have a box graphic that is an over-the-shoulder box with a picture that appears by the anchor. So during readers, you might have a box graphic. Let's say you're doing a reader about the latest economic turmoil in Venezuela. Over the shoulder of the anchor, you might have a graphic of the flag of Venezuela. Or you might have a picture of the president of Venezuela in that over-the-shoulder shot. So a lot of stories have kind of pre-produced graphics. You know, if you're going to do a story about a robbery, they might have, you know, a robbery graphic that they have that's just, you know, they have in rotation that they use a lot. When I did a show at JCTV, we had like pre-approved graphics for whether a story was political in nature, or it was the war on terror at the time that was really big, or, you know, a break-in or an investigation. So you have all these graphics that you can use. A side graphic is very similar, but it's a more expansive and detailed graphic. And it literally appears to the side of the anchor. So half of the screen is the anchor, the other half of the screen is the graphic. And so it's sometimes called a split screen, because you basically have, you know, a split screen going. One side's the anchor, one side's the graphic. Or it might also be called a split screen overlay. This is a great graphic to use if you're going to have like lists. Like, here's the tips you should follow if you're going to be going out in public for social distancing. And, you know, your list might be like, wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart, make sure you don't go out if you have a cold or a fever, those sort of things. So, you know, side graphics are great for lists or more detailed graphics. Let's say an indictment was handed down against an individual. You might list all the charges in the indictment in a side graphic. Still pictures. If you don't have video available, you may use a series of still photos. And you might have, again, a library of kind of still photos that you can pull from if there's ever a generic story you're working on. Like if you're talking about gas prices, you might have still photos of people filling up, or, you know, gas station signs. A popular still picture is maps. You know, if you're talking about, you know, a battle or a conflict that broke out in a certain part of the Middle East, it might be very helpful for the audience to see a map of what you're talking about and figuring out where in the world this is taking place. And usually you do, again, have a regular use of graphics for specific types of stories. Balancing the anchors. Okay, so anchors are important to a newscast. They convey authority, so the audience knows, okay, I should listen to this person because they're not fake news. They know what they're talking about. They're educated. I trust them. They can lend credibility and serve as the face of the station. It used to be said at one point that Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America, because he came from an era in which news anchors were respected and trusted and believed, and we didn't have the President of the United States saying they were purveyors of fake news, which I think is very insulting and damaging. But again, they are kind of the face of the station. But, you know, they want their face time too. And, you know, let's say you have one anchor who gets all the packages, so they're not on camera a whole lot. And then the other anchor gets all the readers, so their face is on the, you know, like for the whole newscast. And so you have to make sure that you're balancing it appropriately, that you're evenly dividing up the packages and the readers and the BOs and the BOSOTs. And also there's sometimes a joke that some anchors, if they feel the producer doesn't like them, that they get all the hard stories. Like they get all the hard stories that have difficult to pronounce names, like a lot of names of foreign leaders or technical medical jargon in them. And they may joke that I get all the hard stories, and you want to make sure that that's not happening either, and that the anchors have equally hard stories to read. Live shots. So back when like live trucks first came out and we first had the ability to actually do a live shot, it kind of became overused because, you know, people were of the mindset that we have this technology, we paid big bucks for it, we're going to use it as much as possible. But doing a live shot for like every story can definitely be overkill. You want to save live shots for, you know, your most important stories and also the stories that lend themselves to good visuals. You know, a fire raging in the background is going to make for a better live shot than, you know, the city council building behind your reporter. So you want to make sure that you are balancing live shots and making sure that it's important to have a reporter there. If it's just going to be a little 30-second throwaway story, there is no reason to roll a truck and a reporter out to the scene and do a live shot just because you can. That being said, you should definitely have a live shot in every newscast. You should probably have at least 2 live shots because audiences tend to believe information from a reporter who's at the scene. Whether like that person is there, obviously they're seeing what's going on with their own eyes. Obviously they're talking to people who are in charge, so they got to know what they're talking about. It's not like they just got on the phone and are repeating information that might not be able to be verified. They're there. They know what's going on. So audiences tend to believe information from live shots. Also, interviews are often easier to conduct face-to-face versus over the phone. You know, if you walk up to somebody and stick a microphone in their face and say, "I'm Sarah Hill, ABC 17 News. What do you think about the president's proposal about reopening businesses?" That person might just start talking because they got a camera and a microphone in their face. Whereas if you call them on the phone and ask them for permission to do an interview, it's a lot easier to say no or to just hang up on you. So sometimes it's easier to get interviews face-to-face. Back timing. So back timing is very important. Back timing means you have to get off the air on time. Your newscast is over at 6 o'clock, 29 minutes and 59 seconds. Exactly. You don't get to go over. And you don't get to go over because usually after the newscast, what are you throwing to? Network programming. What comes on at 5:30? Jeopardy. What comes on at 6:30? Wheel of Fortune. What comes on at 7? This Is Us. Okay? Network programming can start exactly at the top of the hour or exactly at the bottom of the hour. It doesn't start kind of late. It doesn't start kind of early. It's going to go on whether the newscast is done or not. So you have to make sure that you are back time, that you are keeping track of the time, and that you get off the air on time. I'm sure you guys have all seen it happen. I don't watch American Idol anymore, but I watched it, you know, back in the olden days with the OC, the original cast. And a lot of times it would run long and it would just get cut off. And like you wouldn't see the last performance because, you know, it's a network. We're going to the next show. So you have to make sure you get off the air on time. And that's really important when dealing with network programming. Also, let's say you run long and the commercial that you were supposed to play before the 7 o'clock show started didn't play. You don't get the money for that. And your client is going to be really pissed off because they paid for their commercial to appear at a certain time and their commercial didn't air because you ran out of time. So you don't get to run out of time. You live and die by time. You have to be down to the second. And that's why you have to have an anchor who can ad-lib and who can improvise. So when you're back timing, a lot of times now a computer will be running while your newscast is going, and it's going to show you, you know, how much time you have. The seconds tick down, kind of like on a bomb. You know, it's telling you you're running out of time. You're running out of time. However, you can't rely on computers. You have to be able to quickly calculate times in your head. On that computer program, if you see a minus sign, that means you're running long. You never want to see that. That's very bad. The news hole, I talked about this at the beginning of the lecture. That is the time allocated for news after you took away time for commercials, sports, weather, bumps and teases, etc. So again, 30-minute newscast. You automatically take away 8 minutes for commercials. You automatically take away 3 minutes for weather. You automatically take away 4 minutes for sports. You automatically take away a minute for bumps and teasers. And, you're left with about 14 minutes of a news hole. 14 minutes where you actually get to talk about news in a 30-minute newscast. So you need to know how to back time as you're going through it. Did that story run long? If that story ran long by 10 seconds, where are you going to trim the 10 seconds? Oh, the story ran short. You need to fill 20 seconds. How are you going to fill 20 seconds? So you have to constantly be paying attention to time. So if you're not time oriented, if you're frequently late or you're frequently running behind, you're going to have to definitely break that habit if you're going to work in the news. Okay. So that's it for the lecture. So now we're going to talk a little bit about your final assignment. Yay! It's the last assignment you'll have to do besides taking the final exam. So you are going to produce a television newscast. Not really, but you're going to write a rundown. Okay, so here's the assignment. Again, if we have graduating seniors in this class, they have to turn everything in a week early. So graduating seniors have to get this story to me by May 1st. So that's going to be next Friday, not this Friday, but the Friday of next week. And then everyone else has until the following Friday, May 8th, to get the story turned in. However, I would recommend you not wait until the last minute. Okay. Especially if you want to do rewrites. So you are the producer for a local 6 p.m. newscast on a weekday in mid-August. So let's just say it's a Tuesday in mid-August. I've got a list of stories here written for you. Go over the list. And for each story item, you tell me if it goes in the A, B, C, or D block. Remember, C is for sports, and D is for lighthearted stories, and weather always has to be in the B block. Within each block, would your story go first, second, third, etc.? So you're going to say, okay, these 3 stories are going to be in my A block. This story is going to go first in the A block. This story is going to go second in the A block. This next story is going to go first in the B block. And this next story is going to go third in the D block, and so on and so on. You may choose to omit some stories. So you're not going to be able to get everything in this list in your newscast. You're going to have to pick and choose what you keep and what you throw out. Also, you have to note for each item whether you would make each story a reader, a voiceover sound on tape, or a package. Again, generally your more important stories are going to be packages, and your less important stories or stories that don't lend themselves to good visuals will be readers. However, in some items on the list, I've already told you what it is. Also, decide if you want to make each story a live shot. You have to have at least 2 live shots in your newscast. And then add the runtime of each story. So if it's a package, is it 2 minutes long, or is it 1.5 minutes long, or is it 3 minutes long? If it's a reader, is it 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and so on. So for each item, you're going to write 1 or 2 sentences justifying your decision. So let's say your lead story was the city council meeting at 7 is your lead story. So you're going to write right next to this little list item, you're going to say A block, lead story, package, 2 minutes, and it's the lead story because it's going to be the most important story to the citizens and what they're wanting to know about. Okay, so just 1 or 2 sentences justifying your decision. So next to each item on the list, you're going to write the block, A, B, C, or D, the position within that block. So first story in A block, second story in A block, third story in an A block, and the runtime. This story will be 30 seconds long. The story will be 1 minute and 15 seconds long. The story will be 2 minutes long. The story will be 45 seconds long. Or if you decide you don't want to include that story in your newscast, just right next to it, omit. And then for each of these numbers, you're going to write 1 or 2 sentences explaining your reasoning. You're going to say, I'm going to omit this story because it's not that important and I don't have time for it. Or I'm going to omit this story because it's Tuesday and this event isn't taking place until Saturday, so I'm going to do it at a later date. Or you say, I'm going to do this story first in the B block because it's kind of interesting, and my audience may stay tuned after the A block if they know this story is coming up. So you have to write all that down next to each list item. Also, as you're going, once you got everything added all up, for the whole newscast, tell me what the total runtime is. Your total runtime should be 30 minutes, but remember, you're going to take away 8 minutes for commercials. You're going to take away 3 minutes for weather. You're going to take away 4 minutes for sports and 1 minute for bumps, opens, and closes. So all of these things in your list should only add up to 14 minutes. Also remember that weather comes at the end of the B block and sports comes in the C block. And the reason that's important is because you might have 6 stories in your A block, but you might only have time for 3 stories in your B block because you also have to include weather in there. And also, if there's any story in here that is weather related, like there's a lot of stories in here that are about the heat, you might want to put those in the B block because it would tie in nicely with weather. Or if you have any stories in here that are about sports, you might say, well, we're going to do that in the D block because it's going to go good with sports. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to write out the stories that'll be in your C and your B block that'll be in weather and sports, but you do have to keep in mind that they exist and that they're there. So here's the list of stories you're going to go through. From your health reporter, a 1 minute and 15-second package on obesity. It's the 4th in a 5-part series on modern health hazards. From the Future Files, City Council meeting is at 7 tonight. They're going to discuss school rezoning. You don't necessarily have to send a reporter live to the scene because you do have archival footage you can use. You can preview the meeting using any story format you want. You can use a live shot if you want to. From the Newswire, a Census Bureau report shows your county has gained a 9% minority population over the last year, up from the state's rate of 4%. Also from the Newswire, housing stats are down nationwide as well as in your state and county. From a videographer, video from an early morning house fire. How important was the fire? Well, the house was destroyed, but no one was injured or killed. And again, this is an evening newscast, and this was from the early morning. A story idea you got from Twitter. A local Boy Scout troop has built a scale model home out of toothpicks, and that model is on display at the mall. The idea is that they're promoting awareness of renewable resources for shelter. Also from your Future Files, you know that the Airport Authority is meeting at 3 p.m. to discuss a possible runway extension. You can dispatch a crew to cover the meeting. If the meeting's at 3, they can have a story definitely done for the 6 o'clock newscast. You can dispatch a crew, or you can use archival file footage. You can just call and figure out what the result of the meeting was if you don't want to send a crew out there. An idea from Facebook, a local group of approximately 20 people is alerting all news media of its protests at tonight's city council meeting. They want a local park to be renamed in honor of a local civil rights leader. So remember that council meeting is also listed above too, so those 2 stories might tie together if you decide to do them. From the Newswire, the summer heat wave shows no signs of abating. High temperatures and humidity are expected for at least another week. 11 people in the state have died from heat stress over the last 6 weeks. And remember, I'm not saying you have to do this story, but everyone cares about the weather. From a reporter, you have a package that's 1 minute and 5 seconds long. It's on back to school preparations. School starts the following week. So it's Tuesday. The next week on Monday, school will be starting. And also, the university is also starting classes that same day. Enrollment at the university is down 6%. Another Future File story. The county extension office is holding an open house this weekend to aid farmers with seasonal crops. So that's going to happen, let's say, Saturday. And again, it's Tuesday. Overnight beat checks. So you called the police to find out what happened overnight. Well, an elderly couple was mugged last night while walking near their home. They both suffered minor injuries, so it doesn't seem, like much of a story. However, the husband told police he wants revenge and isn't afraid to use his gun. Another story from The Wire. The Centers of Disease Control and Prevention has issued a heat advisory for your area due to the ongoing heat wave. And remember, you had another heat story in there. And from the fax machine. The city public information officer has sent an advisory that residents should restrict watering their lawns. Oh, that got cut off. But it's that residents should restrict watering their lawns to early morning and late afternoon hours. So that goes along with the heat wave story. So these are all the stories you have to choose from. You're going to decide whether or not you put them in your newscast. You're going to decide what block they go in, what order they go in, whether they're packages, readers, VOs, VOSOTs, and you're going to figure out how long each of them runs, and then you should add everything up, and you should come out to about 14 minutes of news because, again, everything else, commercials, sports, weather, bumps, teasers, opens, that's all going to be already calculated in for you. So you should have 14 minutes. So you're going to type up this nice little list, and you're going to submit it on Canvas. If you are confused, please get in touch with me. I'll help walk you through it. If you want to submit it ahead of time and have the chance to resubmit it after it's been graded, you can do so. I will try to get these graded, this week or the start of next week, if you get them turned in that early, so that you have the chance to redo them. But again, you don't have to. If you wait until the last day to turn them in, you won't have the chance, obviously, to rewrite them because grades are going to be due they're due on Friday and grades are due the following Monday. So that is it. That's the only thing you have to do for this unit. There is an optional extra credit assignment. You don't have to do it, but you are welcome to do it. And what you're going to do is, for the extra credit assignment, you're going to watch a newscast. It can be a CBS newscast like the one you watched online for the quiz. And the only reason I suggest that is because they archive and have all their newscasts on the web available for you if you go to the CBS News. So that's very nice that you can access those and not have to worry about catching the news live or, maybe going to where you only have bits and pieces of news. But basically, you're going to watch a newscast and try to find a newscast that uses that peaks and valleys format. So again, it's a newscast that doesn't necessarily have the order of most important story down to least important story, but it has, an important story in the A block, and then an interesting kind of important story in the B block, and then it has kickers in the D block. So find a newscast that you think has the peaks and valley format. If you find a newscast, send me the link to it so that I can watch it and determine, for myself whether it's peaks and valley. And you're basically going to write a one-page paper describing why you think this newscast is a peaks and valley newscast. So it doesn't, shut up, low battery. It doesn't really matter whether I think it's a peaks and valley newscast. If you can write a compelling enough argument for why you think it's a peaks and valleys newscast, you're going to get credit for doing this. And depending on how much effort you put into this will depend how many points you get. If you only write like one paragraph and try to make it fill the page, you're going to get less points than someone who actually writes out a full page and writes something that's thoughtful and explains eloquently why it's a peaks and valley newscast. And also, it kind of has to be a peaks and valley newscast. So some of them are fairly obvious and some of them not so much for. It could be argued either way. So basically, what you're going to submit on Canvas is your one-page paper and a link to the video so that I can watch it. So again, it's just extra credit. You don't have to do it, but it might be a nice little points cushion for you if you're worried about your grades at all. Again, it's due Friday, May 1st for graduating seniors and Friday, May 8th for all others. So I hope that you have enjoyed this lecture and that you feel like you've learned something. And please don't hesitate to contact me. My email's been acting funky from my phone, so I've been trying to log into the computer several times a day to answer emails if I notice that I've gotten a notification from you. Good luck, guys, and I've really enjoyed teaching you, even though I didn't get to see you in person for the last half of the semester, but I'm really hoping we'll get back to normal soon. For those of you that are graduating, I hope you've enjoyed your time at Lincoln, and thank you for allowing me to be part of your educational journey, and best of luck to you guys.